Good morning to everybody. Sorry for just having some pleasant chit chat with people while we've been waiting. I'm Christine Jacobs. I'm the Executive Director of Represent PA. I know we have some new faces and some of our regulars on the call. We've been trying to do our breakfast briefings in 2021 for a few reasons and with a few themes. One of our themes is, just civics for voters. What goes on? How did the legislature work? How does the state government work? And what do you need to know? We've also been talking about a progressive agenda. And this has been was our theme for much of 2020, to talk about what difference it would make to have a Democratic majority in the legislature. Today, we're really pleased to have two fabulous women who represent us in the state. We have Senator Katie Muth, who is from Chester County, and she is, we helped to elect Katie 2 years ago to her first term in 2018. She'll be coming up for re-election in 2022, and we look forward to supporting her. Katie is the head of the policy committee of the Democratic Caucus, and she was elected to that position today, this year, and she's leading the charge into new policies in the state. One of the things that's interesting is the caucus that she's working with now has a record number of women on it, including two new women who were elected this year with the support of Represent. We also have State Representative Elizabeth Fiedler from South Philadelphia. Many people knew her as a reporter for WHYY. And she's been leading a number of major efforts for in the House, and she is now the head of the Progressive Committee of the State Caucus, or of the House Caucus on Policy. So we're really pleased to have both of them here to talk about some of the important issues in the state. So let's talk about what are those important issues in the state. And I just decided to pull up one chart that I got from and it was just an interesting ranking system. I think this was USA Today, but it was talking about, where does Pennsylvania rank? Why do we keep talking about the need for change in Pennsylvania? So how does Pennsylvania rank? Well, we're 41st in the United States in the quality of life in our state. 41st. Many of us live, it's kind of like talking about the pandemic. Many of us, I live in my house in Philadelphia. I can get anything I want delivered. The pandemic has been difficult, but not impossible. But that's not true for most of our citizens in this state. And similarly, when you talk about overall rankings, I can get the healthcare I need, I can get services I need, but when you look across the breadth of the state, that is just not true. And guess what? Since 2018, this was the 2020 survey that put us at 41st. We were only 38th in 2018. So other states are doing better and we're not. We're 21st in healthcare. We have many counties in the state that have no healthcare. They have no access to hospitals. They have no access to, or very difficult access to, emergency care. Our schools rank 32nd, and that's overall in schools, but we know we have the biggest discrepancy between rich and poor school districts in the country. And our college graduates graduate with the most debt of any state in the country. If you look at infrastructure, I think our roads rank 8th worst in the country. So if you look at all of the measures of all of the things that are important to us, Pennsylvania ranks poorly. And how do we change this? And that's the theme of today's call, is how do we change this? We need to amplify the messages that you're going to hear in a few minutes about what change is needed in Pennsylvania. And guess what? This does not happen on its own. We can't just go and vote for whoever we want and then sit back for the next 2 years and assume that the work is done, because it's not. So you're going to hear some very strong messages on changes that our leaders are proposing, but we need to amplify their messages in any way we can and be thinking about that as they're talking. Money, time, energy, and strong voices are needed on these subjects. And how do we talk about these issues in Pennsylvania? And we're going to be hearing more. We'll be talking a little bit more about this after we hear from our guests. But this is, as I said, this is part of my Civics for Voters training. This is what is going on in the state. How bad is it, which is the chart I just showed you, and who is working for us to make change. And so right now I bring you Senator Katie Muth and Representative Elizabeth Fiedler.
Oh, I didn't know I was allowed to control my mute bar. Thank you. I was waiting for you've been asked to be.
No, Katie, we have such faith in you. We give you full control.
Sometimes the Senate doesn't even do that. So I appreciate your confidence.
Well, and having heard many stories about you being muted, I absolutely know that. But here you get full control. We're proud of you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for having me this morning. I don't know how long, do you want me to just give an intro and then talk about all these things, or would you like?
However you and Elizabeth want to do it. You have about 35 minutes between the two of you, and just let us know what you're working on.
Sure. So
and how hard it is to get there.
Definitely. So I will put a plug before I forget. Today, myself and Representative Fiedler have a joint policy committee hearing. It's at 3:00 today. You can look on our social medias to sign up if you want to actually be in the Zoom for the hearing. You can type in the chat box or you can watch it live stream. But Christine knows this is an issue near and dear to my heart, and certainly at the top of my priority list is the environment. And so we have a really great lineup of testifiers that are people from impacted communities, and these are from people all across the state. So it's a really cool lineup of someone from Northeast PA, Southwest PA, Southeast suburbs, from Philly near the refinery, and just talking about how the budgetary decisions impact Pennsylvanians, especially from funding from the Department of Environmental Protection standpoint, and just how we use tax credits to incentivize a lot of gas and oil in Pennsylvania, and how that return on investment is beyond the negatives. And so there's some really cool data that's going to be discussed, and then also hearing from these impacted residents. So I just put that plug in that today at 3:00 we have that, and it'll be available after that online. You can watch it if you can't make it today. But I know you are all an engaged group of citizens, so I just wanted to put that in there before we started. And I think that sort of leads me to what a lot of my work has been about lately, is clean water for Pennsylvanians, not realizing as a lifelong Pennsylvanian that we don't have clean water everywhere. So this isn't a third world country. This isn't a country that's being developed. It's the United States of America. And there's people in Pennsylvania that are drinking out of water buffaloes because their water supply has been contaminated by industry. And so for me, thinking it was just a few residents maybe in my district from the Mariner 2 pipeline, it's not. There are people the whole way across this Commonwealth, some from even the coal industry and legacy pollution left behind from that, literally have to go and fill up water buffaloes weekly. And when I think about the ease of what you just said about we're 41st for quality of life, that doesn't shock me, thinking about people that have to go fill up a water buffalo, pull it into their basement if they're lucky, and to be limited in your ability, and then still have to buy bottled water because water buffaloes is just for shower and cooking. And so thinking about that, it seems so simplistic, but to know that we don't have that for every Pennsylvanian is really, really disturbing. It causes me not to sleep at night. So that's been one of my main things, because I think, as you all know, the anti-fracking versus jobs, and it's this building trades debacle, and there's a lot of contention there. And I think we can't just stop all this industry this moment in time. So we do need a just transition, which is a bill that Representative Amarato and I have been working on, that simply legislates a commission to come together to make decisions about local communities as industry starts to fade away, so that people have a pathway. And this isn't just energy to energy jobs. This could be a manufacturer goes out of a business and you have a workforce that needs retrained. Maybe you want to become a teacher. Maybe you want to become a nurse. This is just a place where those decisions can be made, and that there's programming and funding available, because we've seen that the programs for retraining fail when people don't have a paycheck while they're getting retrained. And so there's a lot of federal money for that. So now that thankfully we had a good outcome in the November election, that hopefully some of that federal funding will come down to Pennsylvania, because it's very much needed. And the people that are impacted by this need to be at the table for those decisions to be made about where their community goes and what it needs to be cleaned up and how it needs to be revitalized and rejuvenated. And that includes communities that have already been left behind, that have been sitting in the dust from industry that didn't hold true to its promises and didn't clean up its mess. So I know Representative Fiedler and I have been talking a lot about tax reform. So we are having a hearing on tax day to talk about Pennsylvania's ways to generate new revenue. I will put in my plug that I'm disappointed, or I'll reframe it to be optimistic. I'm hopeful that maybe Tom Wolf will look at his proposed budget plan for a PIT increase and realize that there is a better way to increase revenue here without hitting some of the working class families that are upper middle class that have been struggling since the pandemic. And I'm concerned that the PIT increase that he's proposed may do that. So we have to think about things more than just legalizing adult cannabis. Like it's great, I'm for it, support it, wonderful. But like if we all do math, it's not enough to bring us out of the hole. So we need to think about other revenue sources. Taxing digital ads, that's something, closing the Delaware loophole with the right measures, which includes worldwide combined reporting, because if we don't do that, it doesn't work. And so these are all things that I know myself and Representative Fiedler and others have been pushing the administration to consider, because I know I'm new here, but if you're going to propose a plan for Pennsylvania, I don't know, when I work with me and my team, it's like we compare it to other plans to see how ours measures up, and who it would hurt, who it would harm, who would have most impact, who would it lift up, and kind of look at it that way. And I'm not sure that every elected official is as thorough or thoughtful. So I'll turn it over to Rep. Fiedler because I've been rambling.
No, you haven't. You have not been rambling. And given us quite a bit of interesting information.
And I can talk about anything else you want me to, if there's something else you could just ask me. There's so many things.
Senator Muth mentioned that she's working on a bill with Rep. Innamorato, that Sarah Innamorato, who represents, is also supported. And I think what you're going to find is there's a lot of teamwork going on across the, between the two houses and within each house, with some really strong people. Many of them are women that we've supported through our PAC. So, and the other thing, when she talks about the tax proposal by Governor Wolf, and excuse me for saying this, if there's anybody who's a big fan, he's the world's worst messenger. And he, the way he put that out, it came across in all the headlines as a big tax increase. And it was really poorly messaged in terms of what the impact would be. And I'm sure that the way it's designed, as Senator Muth said, it'll affect a lot of middle-class families. But there's ways that he could have talked about it and messaged it differently so that it could have been presented in a way that might have some support. That's my bias, of course. Representative Fiedler, what are your big issues right now?
But I'm here now. Thank you so much for having me. I forgive the background. I actually am in Harrisburg for hearings today, so I am in my car outside, so not the most decorative background, but top priorities for me. And thank you to Represent and to Christine and everyone and Senator Muth for having this important conversation. So at the top of the list for me, let's see, education, taxation, clean water and air, and also really making clear the point that the state of Pennsylvania does have money. We do have money, and it's a question of priorities. And I think what is very clear to me, both with Senator Muth and with many of our other counterparts who represent knows well and helped to get to Harrisburg, there is a lot of money, and yet we hear all the time that there's no money to do this, there's no money to do that, there's no money for education, there's no money for for the Department of Environmental Protection to have more funding so they could have more inspectors to regulate the oil and gas industry and to ensure that we have clean water. We hear over and over, there's no money, there's no money. There is money. We found the money. There is money. And so one example that came up the other day from a Penn Future report that I found really startling was that Pennsylvania gave away 3.8 billion with a B, 3.8 billion in fossil fuel subsidies in 2019. And that breaks down to about $296 per resident. So there are a lot of decisions that are made here in Harrisburg that are often made behind closed doors, made by a small group of people, done sort of the way they've always been done. that have a real impact on the lives of people across, my district in South Philly and across the entire state. And so pushing for more transparency. I know Senator Muth is a great champion of asking questions, right? We are not afraid to ask questions. And if you don't answer our question, we will ask a follow-up and we will keep going. And I was a reporter, not obviously, but I was a reporter before I had this job. So I feel very comfortable asking questions and pushing for answers, right? And we're doing that on behalf of our constituents, on behalf of you all, on behalf of those who've sent us here to Harrisburg to make sure that their tax dollars are spent wisely. So pushing for more transparency and also a more fair, equitable education system and funding system for education across the Commonwealth is incredibly important to me.
Thank you. One of the questions I have that's come up, let me ask you a few of the questions that have come up in our chat so far that relate to things you've talked about. Can you explain what the Delaware loophole is?
Sure. So the Delaware loophole is a tax loophole. So if you Google the Delaware loophole or Delaware, there's like on Google Maps, they'll come up this building that's in Delaware. And literally there's a bunch of LLCs and corporations that say that their address is in Delaware. And so we can't make this up. And so it's a way for Pennsylvanian or corporations that have entities in Pennsylvania for them to avoid paying corporate net income tax in the state of Pennsylvania. And I don't know what the newest data shows, but it's over, I think 80% of Pennsylvania corporations don't pay corporate net income tax. And so that loophole allows them to be here without paying their fair share. So think about entities that use our public roads, that use all of our publicly funded resources to operate their business, right? And so they don't pay a damn dime in tax. And so that means the person that works at McDonald's for a poverty wage pays more in tax than some wealthy corporation. So that loophole closure proposal has been floated around. The governor mentioned it in his budget proposal this year. Since I'm a question asker and I don't like to propose half-assed stuff, I've done a lot of reading into this. And meeting with actually New Mexico is one of my new favorite states. Oddly enough, they were able to do this and they have a solar bill about to pass. So I'm a big fan of New Mexico, but the people that helped make that happen in New Mexico have been very helpful, talking to me, my staff, Senator Blake's and Senator Tartaglione's about how to do that. But we also need to have worldwide reporting because that means overseas entities that also have places here in Pennsylvania. If you don't do those two together, closing the loophole and have that worldwide reporting, after about 5 to 6 years, our revenue stream from closing the tax loophole, the Delaware loophole, will be flat. It'll just kind of even itself out. So we don't want that, right? We want a long-term, we want everyone to pay their fair share and we want everyone to make sure that that revenue stream is sound and sustainable. The caveat is that Pennsylvania actually has one of the highest corporate net income tax rates I think in the country, certainly on the East Coast. And so the proposal that the We the People or PA Budget and Policy Center has actually lowers the corporate net income tax. So that means the 20-some% or whatever corporations that are paying their fair share now are paying a really, really high rate while the rest of them pay zero. So that is a huge chunk of revenue that we are not capitalizing on. And so that's a simple, obviously you can see where the Chamber of Commerce comes in and other entities that are against that because people are getting a free ride on our dime, and why would they want to, change that? But as all of us know, if they're not paying their fair share, we're paying it for them, and that's certainly not fair. So that's if you look on the We the People, they have on the We the People PA, they're I think it's a 3-page PDF on it, very comprehensive, breaking down the revenue streams that would come in. And again, that's way more money than than legalizing marijuana.
And I would just add, so the millions of dollars that we are missing out on as a state, we're relying not just on taxpayers, right? My family, your family, our neighbors' families, but we're actually putting an even heavier burden on small businesses, right? All of us want to support our local mom and pop businesses, small chains in our neighborhoods. And they've obviously been through a very difficult time during the pandemic. They are still paying this, right? They don't have the ability to utilize this Delaware loophole, this tax shelter. They are simply trying to operate, employ people locally in the neighborhood and survive. And so this is also for me, an important way to support the small businesses that are so integral to our neighborhoods, is to make sure that these huge mega corporations that are trying to not pay their fair share of taxes in Pennsylvania pay their fair share. That's it. As Senator Muth said, that's all we're asking for, is for them to pay their fair share. Pennsylvanians are paying, small businesses are paying, and these huge corporations should be paying their fair share as well.
Is there Republican support for eliminating the Delaware loophole?
No, not that I'm aware of. That would be amazing, but no, not that I'm aware of. I don't know about on Liz's side of the dome of corruption, but I'd say no.
There should be.
There should be. And okay, so that's a good question, because it really goes to one of the other issues, of course, that it's on your agenda, but will never get passed, which is changing campaign finance laws in Pennsylvania. Because Pennsylvania has no limits on campaign financing, and because it's very open as to what somebody could use their campaign funds for, including paying for buses that go to DC. This means that there's no path to changing, and it's a difficult path without the majority. Somebody did ask earlier in one of the questions, do we still have this, on a past Represent call, we've discussed the tyranny of the majority in Harrisburg, and the lack of the ability to bring bills forward that are supported by Democrats, or largely by Democrats. Is that still true?
Oh, yeah, that's still true. We tried to change the rules. Senator Lindsey Williams and I on swearing in day, despite the Jim Brewster swearing in debacle, we still tried to change the rules, and the rules of the Senate are determined by the majority party. So as a minority member, you have no ability to say that you want, even if you're the chairperson of the committee, a minority chairperson, you have no power in saying what bills run out of your committee. The minority party can't say they want to run a bill on the floor of the Senate. The majority party controls literally everything, and even now your mute button. So it is incredibly frustrating, because you could have a piece of legislation that, is overwhelmingly supported by the majority of Pennsylvanians, and it'll never see the light of day. I mean, we've never passed a bill to remediate lead in our water in the last 20 years, despite there being a bill every session. So a lot of the things that we think exist because we're all like, oh, government protects us from this, because like, why wouldn't they? Like, that's what government's supposed to do. And I think in the last 2 years, I've realized, like, and sometimes it's a lot, so I don't want to be like the Debbie Downer, but it's like, wow, like everything you thought existed as a protection doesn't exist. And so this whole idea of just bringing, I think, public awareness to that is really important, because we're one of the few full-time legislatures in the nation, and we are also ranked one of the most inefficient. And for example, you're going to be able to vote in the May primary on a constitutional amendment, which will ask if you think the governor's power should be limited, and that an emergency declaration can only last 27 days. And then after that, the General Assembly has to agree to extend it. We've never done anything in 27 days besides waste a lot of time. So I can't imagine having the General Assembly be in charge of
Katie, you're frozen.
no.
Okay.
Can you
There,
still
you're
hear me?
back.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. Technology. No, I think that's great. One of the questions that that's been asked, Elizabeth, do you want to comment on that one, by the way?
Yeah, I would love to. So yes, to echo what Senator Muth said, we still cannot get bills passed that have strong Democratic support. We also can't get bills even brought up for a vote. And when I say can't, I mean the majority party won't even allow a vote on bills that have bipartisan support, even strong bipartisan support. So I'm not even saying, but literally taking a vote. So I know that I have brought up in the past a bill about informed consent that I have with Representative Liz Hambidge that would simply require that before you go in for a medical procedure, you get you are informed about a procedure that might happen on your body, an exam, a pelvic exam or a rectal exam. That's something that happens in Pennsylvania. We have the ability to pass a law, and yet even something so basic as that would protect patients' rights, we can't even get a vote on it, even though it has strong Republican support, this bill that we have, even though we still can't get a vote. We can't get a vote on education funding or on funding to remediate lead and asbestos from schools, right? Something that exists as a problem in Allegheny County, in Scranton, Allentown, Reading, right? Across the entire state, schools have lead and asbestos, and yet we can't even get a vote on a bill that would allot money for that. So it's really, it's a shocking level of gridlock. And I feel Senator Muth's frustration as well at times very deeply, because we are working very hard. We've got amazing colleagues here who are working really hard on legislation, and yet the majority party refuses to bring a lot of things even up for a committee vote.
You know, one of the things that I think I should start keeping track of is the number of times that representatives in the House and the Senate get their microphones turned off by the majority. I think, you know, Katie Muth holds the record, but Elizabeth Biedler was working hard on it the last week to, you know, to bring up her numbers. But it's exactly for this reason that as they're trying to talk, they get muted. So I've had a few questions about guns, gun issues, guns as public health issues. Are there any, is there any cross party discussion on possible bills or things that you know that your peers are bringing up in this regard? Any hearings?
So that's another category of legislation that's incredibly important, could save lives. And yet we've seen no movement on quite a few bills. There are a lot of very good bills that we and our colleagues have out there around, you know, lost and stolen weapons, reporting, things like that. Very basic ways in which we could know better what is happening with all of the guns that are circulating in communities, and who, you know, making sure that they're not in the hands of people who really should not have them. So that is, that's another category, I would say, of bills that the majority has refused to move or even hold hearings on. Katie, I don't know if you have anything specific you'd like to add.
Unfortunately, the Senate side is identical. There's a lot of great legislation reintroduced every session, and there's no hearings planned. And I don't, it's difficult because it's like, I don't know if it's not happening in these other elected districts, that it doesn't impact them and their constituency directly. They all seem to love guns. So it's like definitely a very difficult divide. But, you know, there was just a shooting, not in my district. I have West Norden Township, not East Norden. That's Senator Capoletti, but at a bowling alley this last week. So it's right here. So it's not just in a inner city issues. This is happening everywhere. And so it's another topic that doesn't seem to interest the majority party.
What is the majority party talking about then? And what are the things that, what are the kinds of hearings that they're holding?
They love to talk about transparency and accountability. They love to talk about transparency and accountability. If I heard Jake Corman say transparency and accountability one more time, with absolutely zero action to back it up. Election stuff, we're talking about redistricting as well. That came up yesterday.
Questioning the results of the election, the process of the election, and also I had another one. Also talking about what is the series of hearings that they're having in state government on the House side. Sorry, it's taking me a moment. A lot going on at the same time. Talking about just further attempts to limit the governor's powers, right? Senator Muth mentioned the piece related to that you're going to see on the ballot, but also there's just been all these like nonstop hearings about attempts to limit the governor's powers, trying to take away emergency declaration powers, things like that. And, you know, they repeatedly have brought it up for a vote and also threatened to bring it up for a vote and have spent a tremendous amount of taxpayer money trying to do this, talking about it, grandstanding.
Yeah, I've heard it's over millions of dollars that they spent in appeals to appeal the election results. And it was always one of those fascinating things to watch is how the presidential election results were wrong, but all of their elections were all okay. It's amazing how those voting machines worked, or the thread that people can do through this. Some questions about, we had a discussion a few weeks ago about judicial redistricting. And I know that that's not moving forward right now to put something on the ballot in the primary, but I'm sure it's not dead. Any other mumblings?
It's my understanding, and I'm trying to pull up my notes so I don't misspeak, but that this could potentially be, how do I say this without making you all really think there's no good in the world? A negotiating point for which, full disclosure, we are not at the table of these negotiations. So I don't want to say that and make it sound like everyone's included. That's not how this works. So amongst the men, this is a negotiating point for possibly redistricting timelines. So the census data is late, right? So we have these timelines that, whether for congressional lines or state ledge lines, there's different things in statute relative to the state legislature lines that we have to meet, like timelines. And so they have some control over kind of owning that process or owning us in that process. So it's my understanding that the judicial gerrymandering bill, it won't be on the ballot in May. Stay tuned to see if the negotiations go awry and it's on the ballot in November. Again, this is all a complete power grab, because the reality is this: the writing's on the wall for them and they know that. And so they are doing whatever they possibly can to undermine the public's trust in the process, to stop the actual process that's supposed to happen with redistricting. They know that these lines have been drawn unfairly for decades, and that there's more D's than R's in Pennsylvania, and the jig's up. So you're going to see a lot of maneuvering to try to hold on to any level of power that they have. And this is the judicial gerrymandering one, is one of those efforts.
And that'll be really affected by the fact that the census data won't be released until late. And so it's going to be a question of, will the Pennsylvania commissions on this start work early with data that they already have and do a modification later in order to make sure that our elections are not affected? Somebody asked the question in the chat, what do other states do about this? You've always got to remember that every state manages their state legislature very differently. Texas, for example, has a part-time legislature that only meets every other year. Some states, like I think it's $100 a year is what the New Hampshire members of their legislature, and more of the power is concentrated in the governor in those states. Pennsylvania is one of the states that has a full-time paid legislature who not only make a salary and benefits and healthcare and retirement benefits, but also have a lot of control over other spending that goes on in their districts. So Pennsylvania, it's an awful lot of the power is concentrated in the legislature. So it makes it very difficult. We're also one of the few states that still has no spending, no limits for campaign financing. All these things deserve to make it more difficult. We also do not have in Pennsylvania the opportunity for citizens to put bills on the ballot. Florida does, for example, and I think that's how they got their $15 minimum wage on the ballot, was through a citizens initiative. California did the same thing. Pennsylvania, we don't have that. Anything that goes on the ballot has to be approved by the legislature. So the power is concentrated there. So yes, several people have commented, hey, wouldn't the answer to all of this be to flip the legislature? And that's absolutely correct. And that's why we're all working on this. That's why groups all over Pennsylvania are talking in 2021 about registering voters and getting voter engagement. That's why we're doing the kinds of things that we're doing today, is to try and bring this out and to make you all warriors for the cause. I just wanted to call on just for a couple of a couple words, some of the candidates that we supported in the last election who are still very interested in what's going on. Some of them may run again. Let's try Deb Siamaka. Are you there? I saw your name on our list.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
Yes.
Deb, doesn't this make you mad, and is it inspiring you to run again?
It is inspiring me to run again, but I posed a question in there because I'm worried about this redistricting thing. I feel like maybe this is part of their plot to rig the rules of the game again. Like, for example, if the primary is moved next year, if everything's delayed, that's one less month that challengers like me get to try to defeat so-called moderates like Chris Quinn that I'm running against. And to your point, you guys were talking about policy. One of our biggest problems in the suburbs is trying to defeat these so-called moderate Republicans, who they're the ones that vote for this leadership that is completely obstructionist. And somehow we have to get this across to voters that they feel like they're voting for moderates. These moderates are blocking every single gun reform bill, every single bill that Liz is talking about, the kind of water quality. Katie's talking about that too. They can't even get these bills put forth. And so, I'm a former government teacher, and you try to explain to kids that the people who control the rules are the ones who control the legislature. I think the average voter has no clue about that, and I think we need to do a better job explaining that to people.
And I think somebody put into the chat earlier that what's the media doing about this? How do we get more articles placed? How do we get more discussion about it? You're the ones who can help control that. You're the ones who can call your local papers, although a lot of papers are dying off. You're the ones who can write letters to the editor. You're the ones who can use social media to talk about these issues. And you can't wait. If we haven't learned something by now, it's that we're the ones who can make change in this state. It's not going to come from the legislators. We're so lucky to have Elizabeth Fiedler and Katie Muth in Harrisburg, but can you sense their frustration? Can you sense how awful it is? Can you sense how every day it's a battle? And these are people we need to support. We need to get more people like them in. So thank you, Deb. Claudette, don't you wish you were in Harrisburg?
I sure do. I sure do, but the voters spoke. And so, this is why I'm still in the trenches, continuing to do what I need to do, and to make sure that, we move Pennsylvania forward.
And to make sure that the people in Monroe County know what the issues are and what their current legislators are doing. What we're trying to do in 2021, again, is to set the stage for change, and we're not there yet. I also saw Emily Skopov is on the call.
Yep, I'm here.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Don't you wish you were in Harrisburg? You've been tweeting a lot.
I tweet sporadically, and the rest of the time I ignore Twitter entirely. I actually will say I've enjoyed not looking at social media much at all since election day. It's been nice to just not look at it. And I try to follow the news, like actual news, when I can. Sometimes I don't wish I were in Harrisburg unless there were a majority of Democrats, because I just, it's heartbreaking and maddening to see what we go through and how dysfunctional things are there. And people are working so hard. And the way things are set up there, it's like there's, from the Republican side, the idea of bipartisanship is laughable, is even a nice way to put it. So, I'm also waiting to see sort of how the districts shake out. And in the meantime, I went back to school, and I'm getting a second master's in public policy. And I'm looking at, and I've been talking to some people about doing internships with think tanks and looking at really how we sort of salvage democracy now that we've seen all the weaknesses in our system. How do we shore them up so that we don't end up where we ended up, because it's terrifying. And so how do we do that as a Democratic Party? So I'm trying to figure out. I'm still very much in the work. It's just figuring out whether I need to come at it from a different angle to be useful.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for your voice. Senator Muth and Representative Fiedler, we've had a couple questions about rural Pennsylvania, the T. And it's an interesting case because, you know, one of the things that's easy to follow right now is the discussion about the bill, the COVID relief bill, the $1.9 billion or whatever, 1.7 billion in DC, and how it's got like 75% approval across the country. And so I think Biden's talking about it being a bipartisan across the aisle, not across the aisle in DC, but just across the country, and how much support there is, and even how many Republican governors are there. What kinds of legislation and what kinds of outreach are you doing to rural Pennsylvania? I know it's not your districts, but people, how do we make sure that all of Pennsylvania is brought in?
So I have a little smidge of rural Pennsylvania, my gerrymandered districts, so of my parts of my 3 counties, but I'm on the Center for Rural PA board, which is actually me and Jean Yaw, such a great little pair, Google him and you'll giggle, who is in Susquehanna County, Luzerne, or Lycoming County. I don't know if he has part of Monroe, or I can't remember. He is a giant district, very rural. He also has in Dimmock, Pennsylvania, if you've ever seen Gasland or Gasland 2, the documentaries, Dimmock, Pennsylvania has been completely decimated by Cabot oil for the last 11 so years, still as we speak in this moment. And so it's only about, it's a smaller population county, gorgeous. I just went up there about 3 or 4 weekends ago. And I will say that I was I had the Susquehanna County Republican chair come, it's all outside at frac pads, so it was COVID safe, everyone had masks on, and it was freezing cold. And we just pretty much went to these places where there were proposed injection well sites for frac waste, different active frac pads, pumping stations. And then also there's a proposed train line that's going to come down, not in Dimmock, but above it. And it's going to carry liquid natural gas down through Philadelphia and over to New Jersey. They'll take it over and to be exported. And so the people that met with me aren't necessarily anti-industry, but they're incredibly worried about their community safety. These structures will be built near schools. The water issue is still a big issue. So I think that rural PA feels very left behind. And so that's why I chose to go to Susquehanna County on a Saturday, as I dragged my husband and my chief of staff, and we took our drone, and it was too windy to go up because we will go anywhere. I grew up in Westmoreland County, so I grew up very close to Washington County. My family has a cabin in Bedford. So for me, I think that trust needs to be built, because Jean Yaw is a Republican, and these people that were out, minus 2 of them were Republicans, at these frac pads on a freezing cold Saturday. Like, who wants to come meet me and talk about this? But they were just grateful that someone just showed up to care. And I think that I don't represent them from a district line standpoint, but my vote matters for the entire Commonwealth. So if you're not thinking like that as a legislator, and there is this old school wisdom of like, vote your district, and it's like, fuck that. Sorry, I knew I would drop an F-bomb. I was really surprised it didn't come sooner, because I'm super fired up today. Like, your vote matters the whole way across this Commonwealth.
Right.
And like, if you vote just to protect, a coal plant in your district, not realizing that it doesn't have to shut down. Can we have we're all very there's a lot of research in the world. Like, actually make informed decisions that have meaningful impacts and sustainability, instead of just dumping money into fossil fuels because you want to say jobs, and food on the table. There are people that in rural PA that have never had the opportunity to pick from anything else, because that's the only thing that kept those towns alive, and they don't know any different. And so it's not their fault. And so I really, really try to go in with I do a lot of listening. It's really hard to take notes at a frac pad when it's like below 10 and it's windy. I did it. Like I'm a note taker. There are solutions to these things that they're just not on the table, because like you said, not enough people know about how government works. And some that do, they don't trust government, and I don't either. So I don't blame them, right? But we need to bring them back to be loud and be heard, and someone's got to fight for it, because they just want clean drinking water and their private property rights, which is their right.
Is there any legislation that Senator Yaw will be willing to put forth that you would co-sponsor? No.
No, he has stock in Halliburton and wants to deregulate gas, unconventional and conventional gas wells. Yeah, there is an interest. So we do, with like healthcare, opioid stuff, that is a thing on the Center for Rural PA that we don't fight in that, like it's a board. I think he wouldn't. Now the Senate floor is a totally different thing, because I will interrogate him every time on one of his crappy bills and say, oh, did you add in increased protections for fill in the blank? And of course it doesn't. It just like, it pretty much says go dump in a stream. We don't care. And so, thank God the governor vetoes those things, but it's really frustrating because you just like, I don't want him to send me any more Christmas cards with him and his grandkids on it, because like, you don't care about anybody else's. You don't care if anyone else's grandkid is drinking methane infested water or has to live next to a refinery where they can't breathe. Like, and now they're dying of COVID. You don't care. Like, and so it's hard because I want to believe there's a soul in there, but he's dictated by his leadership. And so that's really what it comes down to, is even if there are some Republicans that who've come up to me and like thanked me for X, Y, and Z, they're not, I know some of them have, Lisa Baker has gone to bat for me on some victims' rights issues, but at the end of the day, like if they don't have permission from their leadership, they'll never deviate ever and vote with us, or no one's allowed to work with me. So I'm not the person that I'm like the kryptonite in the Senate. No one's allowed to work with me.
Yeah. Elizabeth, are there similar things that you've seen? You're not rural Pennsylvania, but you're surely living with the effects of the oil and gas industry in your district in South Philly. But are there things that you think might be able to work on across the aisle?
So one, I know we've talked a lot about struggles and frustrations and what we're up against, and that is all really real and really huge and does feel truly overwhelming sometimes, and just really frustrating, right? We're just trying to pass legislation to help people, and it's not, they won't even bring it up for vote. But one recent thing that happened that absolutely benefits will benefit people in rural PA and also in my district in South Philly and across the state is the new housing relief program, which we had some success in making modifications to. So this will use federal funds to distribute for rent and mortgage relief for people across the state so that they can stay in their homes during COVID. And one thing that is very common in more rural parts of the state is that their counties don't have as large of a administrative operation to distribute some federal funds. And so we pushed really hard for changes to this bill to make sure that there was more money allocated for that sort of administrative and other support to make sure that people all across the Commonwealth, whether they live in a city or they live in a more rural place that doesn't have all these folks who are, a whole operation to distribute relief dollars, make sure that they can get help too and be able to stay in their homes, right? As simple as that. So we pushed for that. We pushed for an earlier reevaluation period so the state can kind of look at how much money counties have spent, determine if we should shift dollars around, who needs more support. And I think that's a good example of pushing for legislation that helps cities, but also definitely will have a positive impact for rural Pennsylvanians.
Thank you. And I want to thank our special guests. I want to remind everybody that what they're up against in Harrisburg is like the US Senate, where Mitch McConnell says no Republicans can vote for the upcoming bill. It's ultimate control over their caucus, and it's the way it is. And the only way this changes is if we get different people elected to the legislature and put different leadership in. And so I want to thank you very much all. We'll take note of what's in the chat and get people answers to some of the questions that they ask and get back to you. A reminder that all of our breakfast briefings will be available on through our YouTube channel, including our last one that was on disinformation has been a very popular one so far for people to listen to. Let's go back to the, so thank you, Senator Muth and Representative Fiedler, and let's go back. So I told you when they finish talking, we'd talk about what our next steps are. And let's not waste 2021. This is our opportunity to put these leaders and others into the majority to make the changes we need, because we're not satisfied with being 41st, the state that's 41st in the nation. I think that's a shame. Somebody asked about what they can write letters to the editor about. How about how poorly Pennsylvania ranks on ... Pick an issue that you care about and look up how Pennsylvania ranks. That's a good issue for a letter to the editor. To start talking about what are the problems in the Commonwealth and what are the kinds of solutions that can be out there. We're thinking within Represent, we're trying to think about how do we increase our reach? How do we reach more people? I know that we have 80 participants on this call. We always have many more who listen in to our recordings later. But how do we increase our reach? How do we make sure more people are talking about these issues? And so we're looking for partnerships to set the stage in 2021 for a better 2022. And those partnerships are activist groups. Those partnerships are people who can help us with communication and whatever else we can do to help. We're looking to raise early money this year to support special elections. And one of the things you heard about is districts are going to be really funny. And the whole redistricting process is going to be funny. So our political committee is looking at how do we spend money in 2022? In the past, we've waited until somebody is on the ballot for a primary before we invest money. And in 2019, we actually invested early money for candidates who are going to be facing re-election. I know that Senator Katie Muth is going to need some early money this year because she's a national target. But how else, what do we do about early money? And that's why people ask, why are we raising money in 2021? Because the Republicans are raising money in 2021, and because we have to get out there with early messages, given the issues that are going to be on redistricting and so many other things. We're talking about maybe funding some other things and messaging in some other areas besides direct candidate support. We haven't figured out what that looks like. If you want to help us think about it, send us an email. We'd be happy to talk. This is one of my personal issues. I keep reminding people that Pennsylvania has never had a woman or a person of color as either governor or United States senator. Both jobs are open in 2022. We have to use our megaphone to influence change. We have to do this because if we don't do it in 2022 and you think about re-elections and all that, it'll be at least another decade before we can make change in this. And as I ask you, what else should we be working on? We want you to be part of the movement. One of the things that I mentioned was on messaging. That was when you talk to past candidates and when you talk to people all over about what didn't work for all of us in 2020, it was a lack of a cohesive message, a lack of a platform that all the candidates can run on. They all ran separate races and nothing that looked like, hey, if we change the majority, this is what will happen. And so we're trying to figure out how do we use messaging, what are the right kinds of messages. So guess what? After today's event, we're going to be working with some people who are working Words That Win, the race class narrative, other groups to help put together how should we be talking about these issues and funnel that information back to our caucuses and then to the party to say, these are the positive messages that can win in Pennsylvania. What didn't win in Pennsylvania was just talking about Trump. What didn't win in Pennsylvania was just talking about and ignoring some of the big issues like you're a socialist, you want to defund police. What will work in Pennsylvania, and we want to work with groups to develop messages that will do that. Volunteer with us. Development and fundraising are our big needs, but we're happy to chat to find out what other events we can amplify, what other issues we should be talking about, what other areas should we be working in. And maybe it's something that we as Represent aren't going to do, but maybe we can put people together who want to talk about these issues, because it's important to have cross-state issues so that in 2021, we're getting ready for the new year. We've got some exciting new future briefings. You know, we don't endorse in judicial races. We don't talk about them, except that we did have an event around judicial redistricting because that affected the legislature. But we also believe very strongly in civics for voters. We also believe that people need to know what's going on and there aren't enough ways to learn. So we're going to be doing judicial races and talk about them on March 10th. We're going to be talking about what are all different levels of judge that we vote for. How do you pick a why should I care? And how do you pick a candidate besides voting for the one that's at the top of the ticket who got put there by a drawing? What are the other things we should do? And so that'll be just an education session. And most of you know Women's History or Herstory Month is coming up in March. And so we're working on several things that have to do that are very much part of our brand and part of the women focus. We have talking about modernizing the Equal Pay Act, and we have 3 state reps who are going to be who have proposed something, and they're going to be talking about it on March 18th. Later in March, I think it's the last week in March, we're going to talk about women's health issues with Representative Morgan Cephas, who has kind of led the charge on some of these things, and a Penn professor talking about what are the things that affect women's health that we could use some legislation on. And I mentioned that we're going to talk in April with the state government committee, and Margot Davidson is going to lead that discussion on what's happening with election laws. And one of the things our 2 guests today talked about, you know, things that the legislature wants to work on. And one of them is changing the election laws that they say were so unfair. So we'll be talking about that in April. I also had a proposal to talk about energy and to talk about how the energy structure works, because people say if we get rid of coal, well, coal is going away not because of legislation. Coal is going away because it's not profitable, and it is not profitable for the energy companies. So let's call things what they are, and maybe we'll have a discussion about that later in April. So lots of issues, lots of discussion, and lots of needs for your help and your assistance. Oh, did I tell you that we could use your donations? I never remember to do that. It's not my strong point. Donate to represent. Go to our website, give to us. All the money we raise goes towards supporting these fabulous candidates, the ones that didn't win last year, some who we hope to support in the future, and of course the women that we have that we're so proud to have supported in the past who talked with us today. By the way, on the donation front, watch for our match. We're going to have a 1-to-1 match for Women's History Month by some of our generous donors, just to make sure that we're talking about the issues that are important to us in Pennsylvania. And so it's 9:31. I was pretty close to being on time, but thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for being part of us, and we'll see you next time.